Episode 1. Don't open that door. The first thing Alyra noticed wasn't the creaking floorboards or the scent of dust sealed in silence. It was the door at the end of the hallway, painted shut, but breathing. She wouldn't say it aloud. God knows she had promised herself she'd leave the strange in her childhood. But that door looked like it was watching. The house was a gift. That's what Daniel had said when he drove her up the hill. A blindfold tied with playful hands over eyes. This place has been in my family for generations. I want our children to run through these halls. He had smiled too wide, like he was trying to believe his own words. Now, standing in the long corridor of the West Wing, Alyra could almost hear whispers seeping from behind that painted door. Not words. Not yet. Just movement. Breath. Regret. She tried the knob. It didn't move. Still, a shiver ran up her spine, like the door had flinched. Don't go down there, the old housekeeper had warned with a voice stitched in fear. That room remembers too much. They moved in on a Sunday. The kind of Sunday that felt too quiet, too slow, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Alyra unpacked boxes, while Daniel disappeared into phone calls. Work emergency, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. She didn't press. She never did. Instead, she explored. The east wing still smelled like sandalwood and rust. A rosary hung above one doorway, blackened with time. The library had cracked leather chairs and shelves of forgotten theology, half covered in dust. But nothing felt as alive as that hallway. And the door. She asked Daniel about it once. He laughed. It's just storage. Been sealed since my grandmother's time. Don't worry about it. But he didn't look at her when he said it. That night, the house moaned like it was morning. Alyra lay awake, sheets tangled around her legs. The sound of rain whispered against the windows, but underneath it, there was something else. A soft, rhythmic thud, like footsteps, slow, dragging, then a whisper, right outside the bedroom door. She sat up, heart racing. "Daniel," she called. No answer. She crept out, barefoot on cold wood. The hallway was darker than before. Too dark. The light bulbs flickered, and in the dimness, the painted door at the far end seemed to glow, just slightly, like something behind it had stirred. She didn't go closer. She wanted to, but something in her bones, something ancestral, screamed not to. Instead, she whispered, "What do you want?" For a moment, silence. Then a knock. Once, twice, 3 times. From inside the room. In the morning, Daniel acted like nothing had happened. When she asked if he heard the noise, he shrugged. "Old houses creak, babe. That's all." But when she walked past the hallway later, the door was different. There were scratches, fresh ones, like fingernails had clawed at the wood in desperation. She traced them lightly and felt her own breath catch. The grooves weren't random. They formed a shape, a name, and it was hers. Alyra. Cliffhanger ending that night. As thunder cracked, the sky opened and lightning illuminated the house in flashes. Alyra dreamed of the woman, pale skin, blood-soaked gown, locked inside the room, banging, screaming, forgotten. And then she saw her own face on the woman's body. She wasn't just dreaming the past. She was remembering it. Episode 2. The walls have a pulse. The walls were breathing. Not metaphorically. Not poetically. Not in the way people exaggerate when they feel too much and say the air feels alive. No, the wallpaper pulsed. Like lungs beneath plaster. Like something inside the house was waiting to exhale. Alyra stood in the hallway again, barefoot, robe barely clinging to her shoulders. The storm from last night had bled into morning, and the house hadn't stopped moaning since. She watched the faded floral pattern undulate, ever so slightly, like veins throbbing beneath old skin. She should have screamed. She should have run. But her fingers were already reaching for it. And when she touched the wall, just below the frame of that locked, painted door, a jolt surged through her spine. Not pain, memory, but it wasn't hers. Daniel was acting stranger by the day. He kept leaving the house at odd hours. Calls he wouldn't explain. Whispers behind closed doors with his mother on speakerphone. Alyra caught snippets once. She's getting too close. The voice had said, just keep her away from that part of the house. Alyra didn't confront him. Not yet, because something else had caught her attention. In the far corner of the basement, under a moldy tarp and a forgotten rocking horse, she found a photograph. Crack frame, dusty glass. But underneath, 3 women, all wearing the same necklace. One of them looked exactly like her. At night, the dreams grew louder. It wasn't just a woman now. It was whispers, overlapping, echoing, rising. A chorus of breathless voices calling her name from beneath the floorboards, from the drains, from the closet with no lock. They said things like, "We were never meant to be buried. The house remembers, even when they don't. You came back. You promised." And then the little girl in the nightgown, standing at the foot of her bed, eyes hollow as unlit candles. "Do you know what's in the walls?" she asked. "Because I do." The next morning, Alyra started tearing at the wallpaper. The old housekeeper tried to stop her, pleaded through tears. "Please, you don't want to see what's behind there." But Alyra didn't care. Her hands worked like they remembered more than her mind did, like they had done this before. And when the strip came off, she froze. There were carvings beneath, names, dozens, scratched into the wood, hidden behind floral lies. And some of them were dates, births, deaths, notes written in blood. She never screamed. "I buried her behind the chimney. No one will believe her." And then again, Alyra. That night, the lights went out. No thunder, no storm, just sudden, devouring silence. She lit a candle and walked toward the west wing. Her breath fogged in the air, cold, unnatural. And there, in the reflection of a shattered mirror near the door, she saw it. A woman, standing just behind her. But when she turned, there was no one, only a trail of bloody footprints, leading to the wall. She pressed her ear against it. A heartbeat. The walls were alive. And they were remembering. Cliffhanger ending. In the early hours before dawn, Alyra opened her closet to find something had been left for her. A dress. Old. Victorian. Laced with dust and dried rose petals. Her size. Her shape. And pinned to the collar. A note. In handwriting she didn't recognize, but somehow knew. Wear this when you come back home. Episode 3. Blood in the wallpaper. Blood doesn't dry the same way on wallpaper. It seeps. It stains. And if you're quiet enough, if you press your ear to it, you can hear it scream. Alyra didn't mean to find it. She was just trying to clean the nursery. The one Daniel said they'd paint pastel yellow. The one that still smelled of mildew and mothballs, and something much older, something rotting inside the walls. She moved a shelf to sweep behind it. That's when the paper peeled away by itself. Just a flap, barely enough to notice, but it wasn't dust behind it. It was red, old red, layered, cracked, but unmistakably blood. And someone had drawn something into it with their finger. A name. Forgive me. She didn't tell Daniel. He was hardly there anymore, gone before sunrise. Returning long after the house had returned to silence. When she asked, he only said things like meetings or family business. But his eyes told a different story. They looked like someone who knew the walls were watching and hated that she'd noticed. Alyra returned to the spot that night, armed with a flashlight and a knife. She peeled the wallpaper back, inch by inch. The deeper she cut, the more she uncovered. Beneath the first layer, words in Latin. Beneath the second, symbols, strange, angular, carved in soot. And beneath the third, hair, human hair, curled into the glue, sewn into the paper like thread. She vomited in the sink. Her hands were shaking, but something inside her pulsed harder than fear. A need to know. The kind of knowing that lives in bloodlines, in reincarnated memories, in the marrow of a soul that has been here before. She opened the old family Bible she'd found in the attic the week before. It wasn't a Bible anymore. Not really. It had been hollowed out, filled with pages of names, women, all written in the same jagged hand. Some were crossed out, next to several names, a date, and a word, papered. She called the housekeeper, demanded the truth. The old woman hesitated for a long time. Then, in a voice that cracked like old beams, she said, "It started with the first mistress of the house. She believed spirits could be bound by blood. That pain could be sealed. She used the walls? She used them." The housekeeper began to cry. Some of the wallpaper. It isn't wallpaper. That night, Alyra dreamed in red. The room was spinning. Faces screamed at her from the walls. Limbs reaching out. Eyes stitched open. Mouths gagged with ribbons that once held wedding vows. She saw herself walking backward down a hallway that burned behind her, wearing the same Victorian dress from before, holding a lantern dripping wax like tears. And the door, the painted door, was open. Inside, a girl sat curled in the corner, her face hidden in her knees. When Alyra touched her shoulder, the girl looked up. It was her, a child version, wide-eyed, bloody, forgotten. "You left me here," the girl whispered. Again, cliffhanger ending. At dawn, Alyra stripped the wallpaper from one entire wall, her fingers raw, her breath shallow. She stood back to stare. Dozens of faces stare back. Imprints, faded but real, mouths mid-scream, eyes wide with truth. And in the center of them all, etched deep into the wood, was the oldest name yet, Alyra Evangeline Harrow. Her name, but not just hers. It was dated 1894, and it was carved from the inside. Episode 4, The Bride Who Vanished. There was a wedding dress buried in the garden. No casket, no bones, just lace, rotting silk, and the faint scent of lilac and something far less innocent. Alyra dug with her hands. Not a shovel, not a plan, just instinct, violent and urgent, the same way a mother might claw through rubble to find a child's breath. She didn't remember how she got outside, only that the whisper came again. Dig beneath the hydrangeas. The earth was soft, like it remembered the shape of what once lay beneath. Her nails cracked against stone, then fabric, then the unmistakable texture of something sewn for vows and never worn to the altar. She held the dress up in the moonlight, and it matched the one in her dream. The next morning, Alyra confronted Daniel. She didn't ask him if he knew. She told him, "There's a dress in the yard," she said. "It's mine." Daniel went pale, paler than the man she once thought she loved. His lips parted like he wanted to lie, like he'd practiced a line for this exact moment. But the words never came. He left without speaking, and she didn't follow, because she found the journal tucked beneath a floorboard in the nursery. It was leather-bound, wrapped in red ribbon. It smelled like time and tears. Evangeline H. was embossed on the cover, her own middle initial. She opened it slowly. At first, just pressed flowers, wedding plans, gowns, names of musicians, scribbles about love and wine and laughter. But midway through, the tone changed. Abruptly, he said the ceremony must be private. His family doesn't approve. Not yet. He promised we'd leave after the vows. And then in jagged handwriting, a final line scratched so hard it ripped through the page. The door was never meant to open again. That night, the mirror moved. It didn't fall, didn't tilt. It moved, dragged half an inch across the floor, leaving a trail in the dust. Behind it, another note, written in the same hand as the journal. "Go to the attic. You were there once before." The attic stairs groaned like bones under her weight. The air up there was colder, sharper, touched with the scent of candle wax and old sorrow. There was a trunk in the corner, chained shut, keys nowhere in sight. But the lock clicked open the moment she touched it. Inside were photographs. Dozens, hundreds, all black and white, all brides, all in the same dress. And every face blurred out, except one. Hers, over and over again, as if the house had been collecting her across centuries, across lives. She dropped the photo. It landed on the floorboards face up. Underneath, something glinted. A ring, not her engagement ring. Something older, thinner, gold faded to copper, an inscription inside. Yach! Bound by breath, not time. Cliffhanger ending. She ran to the bedroom, heart punching her ribs, opened her jewelry box, dug past earrings, old pins, scraps of herself that never mattered. And there, at the very bottom, was the exact same ring. She didn't remember owning it, but it fit perfectly. And the moment it slid onto her finger, she heard a voice behind her whisper, "Now we can begin again." Episode 5. Voices beneath the floor. The floorboards were whispering her name again. Only this time, they weren't trying to be quiet. It began with a low hum, like the purr of something ancient stretching after a long sleep. Then came the voices, dozens of them, layered like forgotten prayers, all slipping through cracks in the wood. "Alyra, don't leave us. You promised." She didn't run, because something inside her had stopped calling them ghosts. They were memories. Her memories, just dressed in someone else's pain. She pulled the rug back, revealing the raw, splintered wood beneath. Dust stirred in the air, heavy with secrets. In the exact spot where the whispers grew loudest, she pressed her palm flat, and the wood was warm, alive, a slow, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat. Not hers. Beneath her hand, she heard a voice. Clear, sharp, "We're still here." Alyra found a crowbar in the shed. She didn't hesitate, didn't call Daniel. She hadn't seen him in days. He'd stopped answering his phone. Maybe he had always known this moment was coming, and simply chose to vanish before it did. She drove the crowbar into the seam between two floorboards. The wood groaned, no, screamed, as if being torn from flesh. She peeled the first board up, then the second, then the third, and what she saw beneath wasn't foundation or stone or earth. It was a staircase, narrow, spiral, descending into pitch. She lit the lantern from the attic. Yes, the one from her dreams, with wax still clinging to its rim, and stepped into the dark. Every step down made her feel less real, like she was walking backward into a version of herself she wasn't ready to meet. The walls here weren't made of brick. They were lined with pages, letters, confessions, curses, stitched into the mortar with threads of hair and splashes of blood, and scrawled across them all one phrase. She must remember. The bottom of a stairwell opened into a chamber, and in the center of that chamber was a cradle. It was empty, except for the sound of crying. Not loud, not newborn, something older, wiser. She stepped closer. The air turned thick, metallic, like the breath of something that had been buried too long, and suddenly woke. Inside the cradle, a mirror, and when she looked in, she didn't see herself. She saw Evangeline, the bride, the original, hair matted, eyes hollow, dress blood-soaked, and behind her, the door, always the door. And then she blinked, and the mirror cracked, not randomly. It cracked in the shape of a mouth, and the voice came again. "We're beneath you, always, until you set us free." Cliffhanger ending. She fled the chamber, back up the stairs, back through the hole in the floor. But when she emerged, the house was different. The portraits were all turned to face her. The walls bled faint trails of ink, and in the hallway outside the west wing, where the painted door had always been shut, it was now open, wide, waiting, and at the threshold stood a woman, wearing the dress, wearing the ring, wearing her face, but her eyes were all wrong. They were dead. Episode 6, what her journal didn't say. The journal lied, not in ink, in silence. Alyra held it in shaking hands, the pages brittle with age, some smeared with what looked like rain, others with something darker. But what struck her wasn't what was written, it was what had been ripped out. Whole entries, whole days, torn with fury or fear, maybe both. And in the space where truth should have lived, there was only residue, a trace of something that once bled. She turned the pages slowly. The scent of old lavender clung to the leather cover, masking the rot beneath. Then, between the February and March entries, she found it, a single scrap of parchment, folded, hidden, and sealed in wax. The crest stamped on it? Her family's. She opened it. One sentence, etched in trembling script. Don't trust the one who wears a ring before the vow. She looked down at her hand. The ring still shimmered. Old gold, hollow warmth. It had never looked so threatening. She pulled it off, and the house screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a shift. The chandeliers rattled. The walls moaned. And from the depths of the house came a chorus of voices. No longer begging. No longer whispering. They were warning. You're remembering too much. He's watching. He's waking. She ran to the study. The one room Daniel had always kept locked. She knew how to break it now. Not with keys. Not with force. With names. She spoke it aloud. The name from the journal's cover. Evangeline Harrow. The door opened on its own. Inside, she found the truth buried in boxes. Love letters. Wedding announcements. But not addressed to her. To every woman who came before her. Different names. Same handwriting. Daniel's. Or rather, the man who had worn his face for over a century. Each letter had a promise. I will love you forever. Each one ended the same way. Drink this and you'll never leave me. She opened the final box. Inside was a vial, empty, and a photograph. It was her, standing beside Daniel, in black and white, smiling. But the back was dated 1913. The journal had never belonged to Evangeline. It had always been hers. In every life, in every wedding. She had written her own ending dozens of times. And someone, something, had always torn the final page. Cliffhanger ending. Alyra looked into the cracked mirror above the fireplace. This time, it didn't show her reflection. It showed a wedding. Dozens of chairs. Candlelight. A man waiting at the altar. Her walking down the aisle. And behind her, a shadow taller than any guest. No face. Only eyes. Burning. The mirror whispered, "This is where it always ends. Unless you change it." Episode 7, The Mirror Lied. The mirror never reflected the truth. It only showed what it wanted her to see. And tonight, it wanted her to see her own replacement. Alyra stood frozen before the antique glass, the fireplace behind her casting long shadows across the floor. Her breath fogged the surface, but the image remained crystal clear. The woman staring back was not her. She wore Alyra's face, her smile, her wedding ring, but her eyes, they were centuries old. The mirror Alyra lifted one hand. So did Alyra. Then she raised the other. Alyra didn't. The mimic smirked. Alyra stumbled backward. Breath caught in her throat like a scream that refused to be born. The reflection didn't follow her. It stepped forward. Inside the mirror, she ran. To the hallway, to the stairwell, to anywhere the glass couldn't follow. But every wall seemed lined with reflections now. Ornate frames she swore hadn't been there yesterday. Each one showed her. Each one smiled without her. She smashed the first with candlestick, then the second, the third. But the moment the glass shattered, she heard it, laughter, from the inside, as if something had finally broken free. She collapsed in the library, knees hitting the cold marble with a thud. The chandelier above flickered once, twice, then went out. Darkness settled in like breath over her neck. She turned. There, between the shelves, stood the woman again, not in glass. In the room. "Who are you?" Alyra whispered, but the answer didn't come from her lips. It came from the woman's. "I am the one who stayed." She stepped closer. The gown trailing behind her left no shadow. Her voice was a melody laced with poison. "You've left this house too many times. Always thinking you were the first. Always thinking you could escape. I never left." "No," the woman interrupted, tilting her head. "You died. Again, and again, and again. I stayed. I remembered." Her smile was a wound. "And now it's my turn to live." Alyra tried to run. The floorboards rippled under her feet. The walls pulsed. The ceiling dripped with the memory of forgotten vows. The woman's laughter followed her like perfume. Sweet, rotting, eternal. She found herself back at the painted door. But this time, it wasn't painted. It was open. The room inside was filled with mirrors. All of them cracked. All of them watching. All of them empty. Cliffhanger ending. In the center of the room sat a single chair, facing a mirror untouched. Alyra approached, and this time, her reflection was different again. It wasn't the woman. It wasn't herself. It was a little girl, wearing the same dress Alyra had dug up in the garden, holding the same ring. And in the mirror, behind the child, Alyra was the one screaming. Episode 8, The Room Ate a Child. No one talks about the child. Not in the letters. Not in the journals. Not even in the whispers that haunt the hallway at 3 a.m. But the house remembers. And tonight, it wept for her. Alyra woke to the sound of crying, not the thin, distant whimper of a restless ghost. This was closer. Wet. Raw. The kind of cry that belongs to someone newly broken. It was coming from the West Wing. From the painted room. The one that ate everything she forgot. She walked slowly, barefoot on cold wood, the cry tugging at something inside her ribs. Not fear, not sadness, guilt. The door was wide open now. It didn't creak anymore. It simply yawned, like a mouth preparing to swallow. Inside, the air was heavy with talcum and iron. The cradle stood in the center, rocking, empty except for the sound. She stepped in, and the door closed behind her. There were toys scattered on the floor. Antique dolls with glassy eyes, a wooden rattle, a porcelain lamb with one leg missing. But everything smelled fresh, like it had just been touched, like the baby had just been taken. And then she saw the blood, a tiny streak across the cradle side, and written beneath it, in a child's hand, "She promised I'd be safe." Alyra fell to her knees. It wasn't the words that broke her. It was a sudden flash in her head, a memory not her own, a woman screaming, a man begging, and her, standing with something in her hands, something warm, fragile, alive. She remembered saying, "I can't let her live, not like this." Then a slam, then silence, then the room swallowing everything. She crawled to the wall. Behind the faded wallpaper, she felt again, that pulse, that heartbeat. But this time it was slower, dying. She pressed her cheek against it, and the voice came through. A child's voice. "You weren't supposed to leave me here." Alyra turned and saw the child. Not a ghost, not a memory. A girl, barefoot, in a lace nightgown, holding a cracked music box. Her face was familiar, too familiar, because it was hers. Not Alyra now. Alyra then, before everything broke. Before the room took the first version of her. The girl spoke, voice flat and ancient. "You buried me before I could cry. You made me the house. Now you wear my face and call it life." And then she opened the music box. The tune that played was a lullaby Alyra had never learned, but somehow her lips moved in time, word for word, note for note, like it had once been hers to sing. Cliffhanger ending. The room began to change. The cradle split open. Inside, bones, tiny, curled, peaceful, wrapped in a page torn from a journal. Alyra reached for it with shaking hands. On the page, her handwriting, dated long ago, "I gave birth in silence. I buried her in wood. May the house never speak of this again." But the house was speaking now, and it was screaming. Episode 9, They Knew and Did Nothing. The first betrayal wasn't murder. It was silence. Alyra sat in the middle of the library, floor littered with torn letters and broken frames. Each truth more unbearable than the last. But none of them screamed like the realization she held now. They knew. His family. His mother. Even the housekeeper with her trembling prayers and half-told warnings. They knew what the house did, what it needed, and they gave it to her every time. The box had been hidden behind the fireplace. A false wall, crumbling from age or guilt. Inside, dozens of envelopes, all addressed to the new one. All never sent. Some dated decades ago. Others centuries. She pulled the topmost letter. Opened it with blood-stained fingertips. It read, "If you're reading this, it means a house has chosen you. I'm sorry. We were born into a covenant none of us had the courage to break." No signature, just a crest at the bottom. Daniel's family crest. She opened another. "There will be a man. He will love you, but only until the door opens. After that, you're not his to save. You are the offering." Her breath caught in her throat, not because of the words, but because of the handwriting. It matched the note she found weeks ago under her pillow. Daniel hadn't warned her. He had followed instructions. The next letter was torn, burned at the edges, the ink smeared from what looked like tears. I begged him to stop. I screamed when they took her into the room. She was barely 17. I heard her pounding for hours, but they said the house must eat or we all fall. So I said nothing. Signed, Margaret Harrow, Daniel's grandmother, the one he said was deeply religious. Alyra stood, fire pulsing in her chest like a second heartbeat. This wasn't just trauma. It was tradition. They didn't forget her after each lifetime. They watched. They waited. And when she returned, they handed her over again every time. She stormed into the dining hall. The portraits of Daniel's ancestors loomed overhead, painted in golds and browns, eyes that never seemed to follow until now. She stared at the largest one, a man with a tight mouth, one hand resting on a woman's shoulder. The woman looked like her. No, it was her. Only this time, the nameplate didn't read Alyra. It read, Evangeline Harrow, the first offering. Cliffhanger ending. She lit a match and held it to the base of the portrait. The flame caught fast, but the face didn't burn. Instead, it bled, thick, black, and slow. And from the walls around her, the voices rose again. Not crying this time. Chanting. One phrase. Over and over. The blood must remember. The blood must remember. The blood must remember. Episode 10. She didn't die alone. The house had always whispered to her. Tonight, it whispered with her. Alyra stood among ashes. The portrait now blackened. The floor beneath her damp with blood that should have been paint. And in that silence that followed the fire, she heard it, breathing, but not hers, not the house's. Dozens of breaths, soft, shallow, like the kind made by those who had learned how to exist without being noticed. She turned slowly, and in the shadows behind her, they were waiting. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Women, all of them, different faces, different ages, some barefoot, some in burial gowns, one still holding a child wrapped in muslin that no longer screamed. They stared at her with eyes that remembered what the house tried to erase, eyes that knew her. One stepped forward, the girl from the mirror, the child with Alyra's face. She reached out, pressed her small hand to Alyra's chest, and said, softly, clearly, "You didn't die alone." The ground trembled beneath them, not violently, not with anger, like something awakening or returning from beneath the floors, from behind the wallpaper, from the very bones of the house. And then another voice, older, deeper, frayed like forgotten silk. She lived in all of us. Alyra turned toward the sound. At the foot of a staircase stood the original bride, Evangeline, no longer pale, no longer bloodied. She was radiant, terrible, timeless, and behind her, the hallway that led to the West Wing pulsed with warmth instead of dread. The house lied to them, Evangeline said. To all of us, it fed them fear. It made them believe the silence was holy. She took a step forward. But now we remember, and so does it. Alyra's voice cracked when she asked, "What we supposed to do?" Evangeline smiled, not gently, but the way fire smiles before it devours the cold. "We end the cycle." From inside, the women surrounded Alyra. One handed her a candle, melted and remelted from years of vigils that never reached heaven. Another draped her in a veil, one she had once been buried in. And the child whispered, "He doesn't know we're many." Alyra nodded. Her heart no longer beat alone. It was an echo chamber of lives denied. Cliffhanger ending. That night, Daniel returned. He opened the front door, as he always had, like nothing had changed. But the air was different. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was waiting. As he stepped into the house, the door behind him sealed shut on its own. And upstairs, Alyra stood in front of the mirror. This time, her reflection didn't lie. It was her. And behind her, Evangeline smiled. They were ready. Episode 11. The ring was never yours. She had been wearing a lock. Not a symbol of love. Not a promise. A lock. And the key had always been him. The ring sat on her finger like it belonged there. Too perfectly. Too quietly. But tonight, under the candlelight of the awakening, it pulsed. Not like jewelry. Like something alive. Something watching. Something waiting. Alyra stared down at it. And for the first time, it stared back. The child ghost, the one who once bore her face, spoke first. That ring wasn't made for love, she said. It was made to mark you. To mark me for what? To return you. To who? They didn't answer, because the question wasn't who. It was what. Evangeline placed a hand on Alyra's shoulder. Her voice was low, measured. That ring is not his to give. He gave it to me when he proposed. No, she interrupted. He placed it, but it was never his. It belongs to the house, to what lives beneath it. Alyra tried to pull it off. It didn't move. She twisted harder. Skin broke. Blood welled. But the ring only grew warmer, hungrier. It's bound to your blood, said one of the women. Forged from those before you, said another. Melted in the cradle of the first sacrifice. Evangeline stepped closer. You can't remove it by will. You must reject it with memory. They led her into the deepest room, one the house had hidden even from itself. Inside, every surface was reflective, but none of them showed her face. They showed every woman who had worn the ring before her, each one dying, each one betrayed, each one reaching out, screaming, tearing at the ring as it consumed them from within. And at the center, a basin of salt water, of blood, of time. She dipped her hand in. The water boiled, and the ring turned black. She screamed, not from pain, from the flood. Memories not her own poured into her skull. Images of altars, of chants, of men holding hands while women bled into stone, all wearing rings like hers. It wasn't love. It was a contract, signed with fear, sealed with lineage, and paid for in repetition. Cliffhanger ending. Alyra pulled her hand from the basin. The ring had melted into her skin, but in the reflection of the water, she saw herself without it. Not bound, not bleeding, not afraid, just her. And the water whispered, to become free, you must now make him remember. Episode 12. The house chose me. She had spent her whole life believing she was brought here, lured, tricked, cursed, but the house didn't trap her. It summoned her. Alyra stood in the center of the chamber beneath the west wing, the original heart of the estate, older than any stone above it, older even than the Harrow name. The room pulsed like a womb remembering labor, and on the walls, symbols began to glow, one by one, each mark a record, of lives, of deaths, of returns. But at the center of the wall was one symbol untouched by time, a spiral, carved deep, and beneath it, in a language older than words, the end must be born from the inside. Daniel had always thought she was chosen to be sacrificed, but the truth was older than his bloodline. She was chosen to destroy it. The bloodline had fed the house. Again and again, bride after bride, each marked, each offered, each forgotten, until one returned with memory intact, with the ring burned out, with the ghost behind her, with the hunger reversed. Evangeline appeared beside her, but this time she bowed. You weren't brought here to bleed, she whispered. You were brought here to birth the silence. Alyra blinked. What silence? Evangeline looked toward the ceiling, the one that comes after it stops feeding. The house groaned, a sound not of fear, but of fear losing grip. For the first time, it couldn't taste her, because she wasn't offering herself. She was offering it a choice: starve or die. The other women gathered behind her, all of them, the ones with the torn veils, the ones from the mirror, the ones who never screamed, each holding a piece of the house it had stolen, a name, a rib, a lock of hair, each stepping forward and pressing it into the floor, and the floor began to crack. From above, Daniel's voice echoed. He was screaming, but no one was listening anymore, because the house wasn't his. It never was. It had always belonged to them, and now it belonged to her. Cliffhanger ending. The spiral on the wall lit with flame. The house shuddered, and the voice, the true voice, rose from the earth itself. She is the last, and the first, the memory made flesh. Alyra stepped into the center, and as the house began to split open beneath her feet, she whispered back, "I remember everything now, and I am not here to stay." Episode 13. I remember everything now. It didn't feel like death. It felt like awakening. Alyra stood at the heart of the house, where the walls no longer bled but breathed, where the floor cracked not from age but from release, and where the portraits upstairs had all fallen. Faces to the ground, finally ashamed. She was barefoot. The spiral beneath her feet glowed with something not fire, not light, something older, something only the soul could name. And for the first time, she remembered all of it. She remembered the first veil she wore, woven by her mother, stained by a blade. She remembered the second life, when she was drowned in wine, kissed by lies, buried beneath roses. She remembered the third, the fourth, the fifth, every time she was called beloved and then fed to the walls. She remembered the lullabies, the buried cradles, the letters she wrote with shaking hands in locked attics. She remembered screaming until her throat tore and no one came. And now, she remembered what she was never supposed to know. She was never a victim. She was a witness. And witnesses carried truth into fire. The women stood around her, no longer ghosts, just women, some weeping, some singing, one holding a baby who would never be taken again. They did not speak, because she was the one who would speak now. She reached into the spiral, into the glow. Her hand vanished, and when she pulled it back, she held the root of the house, pale, beating, rotten with memory. She looked to Evangeline. Evangeline nodded. Alyra placed the root on the floor and crushed it beneath her heel. The scream that followed didn't come from walls. It came from everything that had ever been silent. The sky outside cracked. The floor roared. And from beneath the house came a shudder of release, like 1,000 chained daughters finally exhaling at once. Then, stillness. A stillness, so full it felt like music. She opened her eyes. The house was gone, not destroyed. Released. The earth where it stood was clean. The sky above it clear. And in the wind, she heard only breath. Living breath. Final moments. Alyra walked barefoot down the path that used to lead to the house. She passed no ruins, no bones, only wildflowers. And in her palm, she held the ring. Melted, soft, no longer cursed. She walked until she reached the old river. There, she opened her hand and let the ring fall into the current. It didn't sink. It floated, then vanished. And from somewhere behind her, a voice, hers and not hers, whispered, "We are not forgotten. We are remembered." And that is how we begin